It's really hard to be worse than Daniel King. He is a laughingstock par excellence. He's just got some problems, and the biggest of them seems to be the fact that he doesn't actually know anything about anything. He is just not that bright. If he was, it wouldn't be so ridiculously easy to rip him a new one. But that's what we're here for today, so let's get to it. This is 15 videos watching Daniel King prance around on the stage, making a complete fool of himself. Maybe it's 16, I don't really remember. In all that time, has he made a single credible point about anything? Let me know down in the comments if you think he has, because I sure can't remember it. Maybe you can. This is really just kicking a dumb kid at this point, but I'm going to keep doing it, A, because you all seem to like it, and B, because the dumb that is so absurdly obvious here, it's the same dumb that people like Frank Turek and William Lane Craig, they're doing it too. It's just a little more hidden in their videos. Not much, to be honest, once you know what to look for, but this is just out there for all the world to see. This is really easy to identify. So let's put on our steel-toed boots, because we've got an imbecile to kick.
C.S. Lewis says, "These then are the 2 points that I wanted to make. First, that human beings all over the earth have this curious idea that they ought to behave in a certain way and cannot really get rid of it."
Now, you know by now that I have pretty much no respect at all for C.S. Lewis, but he does make a legitimate point. Yes, people think they ought to behave a certain way. It's not always the same way, which curiously he doesn't mention, because it doesn't serve his purpose. The reality is they behave as they have been indoctrinated by their cultures, with a little bit of programming by their biology. God has nothing at all to do with it. Something that I presume Lewis wouldn't approve of, but let's get back to the quote.
Secondly, that they do not, in fact, behave in that way. They know the law of nature, they break it. These 2 facts are the foundation of all clear thinking about ourselves and the universe we live in.
That second part doesn't make any sense, does it? Certainly, some people break it for their own purposes, but most people, they are law-abiding citizens and they do what their societies say they ought to do, at least in the major points. I'm honestly not sure what he was trying to get at there.
By the term law of nature, Lewis means that our world is an objectively moral universe.
And that's wrong. And sorry, Danny boy, but our world is not a universe. I know he isn't very good at words or much of anything else, but come on. Regardless, just because someone says a thing, that doesn't make that thing so. It absolutely is not an objective moral anything. If it was, then people in one place and at one time would all do the exact same things and have the exact same moral views as people in all other places and at all other times. Yet they don't, because that is not how reality functions.
It is said that everyone has an innate sense of right and wrong. First, because everyone has a moral sense, it is universal.
No, not even remotely close. My moral sense is not the same as some Muslim fanatic's moral sense in Pakistan. His moral sense is not the same as Charles Manson, if he was still alive. At least, I certainly hope not. I'd like to think that my moral sense is not the same as most religious shysters, even though a lot of us live in the same society, because we don't have the same beliefs. It just doesn't work that way. Not that I suspect Daniel cares. This is just catering to the gullible in his audience. It's what they all really want to believe.
Second, because people are born with this moral sense and have no control over whether they will have it or not. It is objective.
No, premise 1 was wrong. Premise 2 is as well. Now, if it was true that everyone had the same moral sense, it would be objective, I suppose, but since that's demonstrably not the case, this all becomes simply laughable. If everyone had the same moral sense, then we would have no criminals. This is where the religious just have to come up with a load of bald rationalizations. Oh, they just want to sin, or some stupid crap like that. It's the same kind of thing where theists will argue with atheists. Well, everybody knows that God is real. No, I don't. Yes, you do. It's really hard to argue against people who are so deluded that they think that they know what's in your head better than you do. It's why we go by evidence, and the evidence is very, very clear. Not everyone has a common moral sense. In fact, virtually nobody does. And people's morals, they don't come from any gods. They come from other humans and from evolution. That's what the evidence shows. Your beliefs don't mean a thing. Deal with it.
In the same way that we don't get to choose if gravity exists, we don't get to choose the existence of right and wrong.
That's an assertion. Gravity, nothing you can do is going to make you immune to gravity. Nowhere in the universe that we know of can you go where gravity isn't going to affect you in some way. If you go away from other people, though, if you go to a deserted island, if you move to another planet where you're the only sapient being there, then morality is pretty much going to be meaningless. You can do whatever the hell you want to do. Now, it might be a bad idea. It might not be conducive to your overall survival, but you can still do it, and there isn't anyone there to tell you if it's right or wrong. You have pretty much created a moral-free zone, whether Danny likes it or not.
Or if we have a conscience.
Again, your conscience is a reflection of the social moral values that you were indoctrinated into. That's why people who move between vastly different cultures, they tend to have a lot of problems. What seems right inside is absolutely wrong where they live now. It depends on how vague you want to be, I suppose, and if you notice, the religious tend to be pretty vague when talking about this. But that's how it actually works. Well, everyone knows better than to kill people. Well, sure, mostly that's true. Empathy and enlightened self-interest and all. Just don't go talk to a Muslim about heretics and apostates, because according to at least some subset of Muslims, killing former Muslims is a really good thing, and it is commanded by their faith. And that's also been true of Christians. Just look at history. Although now that a lot of Christians, at least the ones that Daniel is likely to run into, those have been westernized and therefore have adopted similar cultural values, they don't actually do the things that their Bible commands them to do. It's very, very, very easy to point out all the problems in Daniel's claims. He just doesn't want to see it that way because it would hurt his feelings.
Simply, we are part of a moral universe where there are objective moral values of right and wrong, good and evil, justice and injustice.
Just a suggestion, but maybe you should try a take 2 where you wipe the spit off your chin. It also doesn't matter how many times he says it, it doesn't actually make any of this true. You'll see this across the board from the religious, and to be fair, from a lot of non-religious people as well. When they get challenged, they just rephrase and repeat it over again verbatim in hopes that this time it might slip through. They can't imagine that they're not right, and because they've just got to be right, at least in their own minds, any disagreement will be ignored. Well, you don't really mean that. Well, yes, I do. I've got all the evidence on my side, or at least they don't have any evidence on their side to suggest that what they are saying is true. This is where the burden of proof comes in. If they can't back it up independently and objectively, then we've got no reason of any kind to take anything that they say seriously. So we don't. Your fifis don't matter.
Where does this moral law come from?
Ooh, I bet he's going to tell us, but telling us doesn't mean anything. Proving it does. He's going to say God in a second, and I'll just counter with invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies, or at least I could, and we'd be right back at square one. Muslims would say Allah. Hindus would say something else. Scientologists, I don't know, they'd say something. How do you actually demonstrate which, if any of us, is actually right? Because that's where evidence comes in. And you notice who doesn't actually have any. Exactly.
Just like the physical universe, the objective moral universe doesn't come from nothing.
And nobody but the religious ever says that it does. Beyond the fact that there is no objective morality at all, but it also wouldn't come from nothing because we all know where it actually does come from. It comes from human minds. We made it all up and we continue to do so every single day. Just because the religious are uncomfortable with that demonstrable fact, that doesn't actually matter, does it? I really wish they could figure this out.
All people have a conscience and are born with it. That conscience does not come from nothing. The knowledge of right and wrong comes from God.
Or invisible, intangible, universe-creating, morality-inventing pixies. Why? Because I say so. That's what all this comes down to after all. Just make something up. You'll have as much intellectual standing as Daniel does, which I think we all know is none at all. But I really want it to be true. So what? If you notice, every single one of his Proof God is Real videos effectively does the same thing. He purports to present a problem, then he suggests a solution with absolutely no evidence of any kind to validate it, and therefore God is real. That's just stupid though. We can all do the same thing. Anyone can. In fact, billions of people have over the years. Because that's exactly what religion is. Pointing out problems and making up solutions for a buck for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. How can people not see this? Must be self-imposed ignorance.
God is good, and everything he does is good and just.
Says who? How have you determined any of this in a way that is verifiable outside of your head? Well, God is like this. Really? How do you know that? Well, I just do. Sorry, that's not good enough. Again, this is why they stick to their own echo chambers, because I think they know deep down inside that we're just going to laugh at them, and we should. Otherwise, you get crazy people like Daniel. Crazy people with crazy ideas out for a buck because fee-fees. Now, if people went around and commented on every single religious video out there, and I know why people don't because there's not enough time in the day, but if everybody went out and said, well, this is nonsense, and then pointed out exactly why, I mean, you actually have to put in the effort and show what it is they're doing wrong and provide evidence. But if people did that consistently to the point that all of the apologists either had to turn off their comments entirely or just give up because everybody was laughing at them, I don't think we'd see these people anymore. Now, as I said, I know nobody's got time for that. I hardly have time to do what I do. It's why I only respond to the tiniest sliver of religious content out there. It's actually why I don't restrict my commentary to just the big names with the big numbers, because I figure there's already enough channels out there who are going strictly after those. I'll go after anybody, even the small channels, because all of the dumb needs to be addressed, especially the things that fly under the radar that the big channels go after. No apologist ought to be immune. Every single one of them needs to be challenged. It's one of the reasons I do what I do. I don't know, I guess I'm doing God's work.
Even if people have no knowledge of God, God has given people a conscience that tells us what is good and just.
Says who? That question isn't going to go away. This is just, but I like it. And that just makes you look like an idiot. Of course, Muslims, they'll just say Allah did it. Hindus, well, you know. Scientologists, Your guess is as good as mine. They all have their own answers, which are just as unsupported and absurd as Daniel King's are. Just because you really want it to be true, that doesn't make it true. Just because it gives you a theological woody, that doesn't mean anything. This is why we have to just keep pointing out what they're actually doing. They are appealing to emotion, not intellect. They are proposing solutions that don't actually exist in the real world. They are relying on faith, not facts. And nobody should ever accept faith as a poor substitute for reality. If you do that, then you have problems. And I think that explains Daniel King quite well, don't you? Next comes a Bible verse, and as you all know, we're just going to fast forward right through that because the Bible doesn't prove anything either.
In Romans 2, 14, 25, Paul writes, "For when Gentiles who do not have the law of God, by nature do the things in the law, these although not having the law are alive themselves, who show the word of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and between themselves their thoughts accusing or else excusing them." God is the only possible source of an objective right and wrong.
First off, that is simply wrong. There are tons of possible sources. It's just the only source that you happen to like. And that doesn't matter. It also assumes objective morality, which, again, hasn't been supported. It always comes down to, but I like it. But it doesn't matter if you like it. It also doesn't matter if you're talking to a theist or not. I have never, ever, not once in my life, seen a single moral realist ever that didn't fall into that. This is what they want to be true. It doesn't matter if it actually is, it's what they wish the world would be. And that's exactly where philosophy gets misused so often. The idea that your fifis translate into active fact just because it makes you feel comforted to think so, that is absolutely absurd. The world is what the world is. You don't matter. The entire human species doesn't matter. If we're trying to find actual truth, actual fact, an actual demonstrable understanding of what the world really is beyond our fifis and ridiculous faith, then we have to be able to set our fifis and faith aside and look only at the objective facts to find out what's really going on. Now, are there some potential problems with that? Maybe, but that ought to be the goal. I care about the things that would be true even if humans or any other intelligent species had never evolved in the universe. I don't care how you feel about it. I care what you can prove. Can we please get back to that? Because once we've determined the objective state of factual reality, then we can worry about how we want to react to it. Because guess what? Our reactions don't matter to anyone but us.
Atheists might reply that rules are created by society and that anything society approves of is right and what society disapproves of is wrong.
Because that's how it works. Again, all you have to do is look at laws and societal norms around the world. Now, King would probably say that's not right and wrong, that's legal and illegal, but it is the only demonstrable thing that we have. You could also go around the world and ask people what they thought was right and what they thought was wrong, and you'll get the same results. In fact, Pew does a survey of human moral issues in 40 countries, and there has never, ever, ever, not once been universal agreement. I'll link to the page down in the description. King is just wrong. Big surprise there.
To support their argument, they point to examples of how morals can differ from culture to culture depending on the subjective will of the majority. Thus, while most cultures agree that cannibalism is wrong, in some tribes in Papua New Guinea, it is considered noble to eat your enemy. But is that the same thing as believing that cannibalism is a moral good?
If you ask the cannibals, absolutely, because he just described it that way. They think it's honorable. Are you listening to the words that come out of your own mouth, Daniel? I don't really think so, because the whole thing is entirely subjective. Daniel might not like cannibalism, to use his example, but the cannibals certainly do. That's why they do it. Christians, at least some Christians, they might not like homosexuality, but the gay people certainly do. Alcoholics like to drink. Drug users like to use drugs. Everyone has different views. Now, that's not to say that all views are objectively the same. I mean, doing anything to excess is bad for you, but for thinking about good and bad, you can like what you want to like and dislike what you want to dislike. Society might disagree and there might be consequences to your actions, but that doesn't change your own internal value system. So Daniel is still wrong.
While the cannibal chief may eat people, if we say to him, "Today we're going to eat your child," he knows that eating his child is wrong.
Nope, because we can go right back to Abraham and Isaac in the Bible. Murder is wrong, but hey, if God tells you to do it, you do it. That's the whole point of the story. Now, cannibals, they don't randomly eat people. I know King isn't aware because he's kind of an idiot, but there's a reason for it. Usually it's ceremonial. It's the same thing as when the Aztecs were ripping out people's hearts. There was a reason for it. In fact, that reason was so compelling to people at the time that those who were captured in battle, they would line up willingly to be sacrificed because they thought that their sacrifice would benefit those they left behind. If you appease the gods, everybody wins. These are not hard examples to come up with. Daniel is just dumb.
He does not celebrate the announcement as a victory for cannibalism. For thousands of years, cultures around the world have practiced the same moral values we practice today.
That is absolutely untrue. There was a time when slavery was widespread, even in the Bible. Today, it's relatively rare, but it is not extinct. And I'm not talking about chattel slavery. I mean people who were enslaving their own people. It was everywhere, and now it isn't. Why? Because most people changed their minds. The moral values changed. Moral values do that all the time, and for some reason, theists like King don't have a clue. If you go to places like small villages in India, Pakistan, places like that, killing a family member who you think has brought shame on your family, that's just fine. In fact, it's only been relatively recently that some countries, outside countries, have brought pressure upon the governments of those countries, and it's started to decline. A little. It's still practiced, though, among the widely religious population. Or take murdering female infants. In 2020, the UN found that nearly 45.8 million girls were missing in India due to pre- and post-birth selection practices. They want boys. Girls are largely disposable. And of course, China does the exact same thing. Every single year in China, nearly 2 million girls are just murdered just because they're female. And that is perfectly acceptable to the people who were doing it. That culture finds it normal. Now, we might disagree. But then again, who gives a shit about us, right?
In every society, some actions are considered good and some are considered bad. Murder, theft, and lying have all been considered wrong throughout human history.
Wrong. I already went over that. You are just wrong, and demonstrably so. This is what happens when you're ignorant of the actual facts, and I think we all know Danny Boy is ignorant of pretty much everything. There are all kinds of instances of theft that you can find that many people actually think are perfectly fine. I recently did a video on morality where I pointed out that people who say, well, it's just a faceless corporation, I deserve it more than they do, and then they steal things from them, that is pretty common. It is not on the societal level, certainly, but there is an example of individuals with different moral values than others. The very existence of prison shows that people have different moral values. In fact, here's another example because we're going to give a whole bunch of them. In 1919, the United States enacted the 18th Amendment prohibiting alcohol consumption. Drinking was decried as moral decay. For a period of almost 14 years, it was illegal in the United States to drink alcohol, although, let's be honest, tons of people did anyhow. On December 5th, 1933, it was repealed, and then it was just legal to drink again. So the United States collectively decided that drinking was immoral in 1919, and then decided again collectively that it was perfectly moral again in 1933. Morality changed. Why is this so hard to understand?
If there is a moral law, then there must be a moral lawgiver.
If is not because. You have not demonstrated that there is a moral law yet. In fact, I have conclusively proven that there isn't. Of course, the religious don't care about the actual facts. They just really want to believe. And we all know how pointless that is. It's why this whole thing is such a ludicrous joke.
If there is true justice, there must be a just judge to dispense it. This judge must be morally perfect. In order to make perfect judgments, this judge must be all-knowing.
Well, I guess that lets God off because, seriously, have you read the Bible? God is a frickin' dick. The moral argument doesn't work with people who don't respect your imaginary friend. Again, that's why he's not making this video for us. And since I'm thinking about it, this video, which was made more than a year ago at the time that I'm writing this, it has 37 views and 0 upvotes, 3 downvotes. Nobody is paying any attention to this idiot. I hope nobody is surprised.
In order to enforce his judgment, this judge must also be all-powerful.
You know, it's been a very long time since I saw a single sentence that had that much wrong with it. Absolutely everything that he just said is wrong.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
This is why Daniel King is such an idiot. He is running off pure fifis and faith, and even his own side knows that he's an imbecile. Not one person in the comments on this video is a Christian. They are all calling him out for being a moron. And that's pretty much why we do it anymore. This isn't because I hope he's eventually going to get a coherent point from his side, because I think we all know that's not coming. This is just to laugh at him. It's good for nothing else, because he is such a laughingstock. Now, I want to get to video 20 before I give up, unless you all make me keep going. First, it's just a nice round number, and there are some things I want to get to in there first. I'll keep going if people really, really want me to, but it is not going to get any better than this, folks. Daniel King is a complete idiot.
Thus, our innate sense of right and wrong and our inherent desire for justice requires a completely moral lawgiver who is all-knowing and all-powerful. This perfect, omniscient, and omnipotent judge is the one we call God.
No, you're just a moron. I mean, this is really the problem, not only with Danny Boy here, but with most apologists. They just really want God to be real, so they invent some made-up bullshit in their head and slap a God label on it and just call it a day. But I really want to believe. No, you're just a gullible fool without the sense in your head to care if any of it is actually true. I mean, that's Daniel King for you. Dumb and gullible. That's his entire shtick, right? Empty claims with God stapled on because he really likes the idea. Well, big deal. This is why he, and really all apologists to be honest, fail so badly, because they're all doing it. Most of them are a little more competent than Danny Boy is. Most of them can get their words out in mostly the right order, but the output is just the same. Shit in, shit out. That's all any of these people have. Complete and total bullshit. It's why I pause King so often in his videos. It's why this thing got to be so long. There's just so much wrong going on, and if we try to be complete and accurate, which I try to be, then that just takes a lot of time. It's really why the Gish Gallops work, if you don't see it coming. You can spew nonsense a whole lot faster than you can debunk it. That's another good reason not to do debates, because anything requiring time limits, that's a problem. Actual evaluation of claims, it can't be on a clock. It takes as long as it takes. And this is as long as this particular load of king poo took. Hopefully, the next one will be a little bit shorter. Hopefully.